in page 99, actually, let me actually go to page 101. They're going to talk about users, roles, and groups. And so far, the roles that you've seen are predefined roles, but maybe you're not happy with those, and maybe you want to create your own roles. You know, because you may want a user to only be able to access certain parts of System Manager, certain menus, certain sections. So a role is a way for you to assign permissions to a user so that that user can only click on certain things. We're going to see later that groups allow you to group resources together. We haven't talked about resources yet, but grouping resources allow you to assign a role to a user that only has access to a group of resources. I know that probably this doesn't click with you right now because we haven't talked about groups in a lot of detail. We're going to first talk about roles and then we'll work with groups, okay? So here they're going to talk about how to create a user, because there is another way to create a user. If you go to user management, manage users, and then notice that the only one right now is admin. If you go to that page and you click on new user, from that page you have the option to create administrators, just like the one you previously created, or end users. And you may be asking like, oh, hold on. So there are two different ways to create administrators. One, the one you just followed, and this other way. And the answer is yes, there are two ways to create administrators, and we ended up with two ways of doing this when Avaya acquired Nortel, and then we ended up with two ways of doing this. The one that you just used through the administrators menu is kind of the Nortel way of doing it, which I think is a little bit cleaner. The one that I'm about to show you, it's the Avaya way of doing it. So when you create it in the Avaya way of doing things, you could, during the creation, define if that's an administrator or an end user. An end user is just someone with a phone, a communication device, or maybe both. Maybe it's both an administrator with a communication device. So you go and create new user, and then you need to specify the identity tab. In the identity tab is where you specify last name, first name, login name, and password. And actually, you know what? Let me show you this with the real system. I think it's better, and sometimes I'm able to point out some stuff that is not in the slide. So what I'm saying is that you could go to user, manage users, click on new, and here I have the option to create either a new user that will have a phone associated to the user, or an administrator, or maybe the two of them under the same profile. Right now I'm going to create just an administrator, but I'm just going to do it in the Avaya way of doing things. You just did it in the Nortel way of doing it. So in the Avaya way of creating administrators, I need to specify the identity tab, where I'll go with a last name, maybe my last name, Gonzalez, first name, Nestor, and then the login name needs to have the structure of an email address. Like user portion and a domain portion. It really doesn't matter what you use as long as it has that structure. So I could use something as Nestor at Avaya.com. Notice that Avaya.com is a domain that is not defined anywhere in System Manager. It could be anything as long as it complies with the structure of an email address. A lot of the time, when this is not an administrator but an end user, customers like to assign here an extension number, like 1234, let's say, the extension number of the user. But this is not to actually give that user the extension number, it's just for identification purposes. But again, as long as it has a username and user portion and a domain portion, System Manager is gonna like it. If I just say something like Nestor, something like that, System Manager won't allow me to say. So I'm gonna go with Nestor at Avaya.com, And then here's where I set the password, which in this case is going to be temporary. I will have to change it. Avaya123, Avaya123. Now, in the communication profile, that's the place where I could assign communication devices to the user. Right now, if this is just to be one administrator, like a pure administrator, I don't need to assign anything in the communication profile. All I would need to do is go to the membership tab, and in the membership tab is where I assign a role to the user. So if I click on assign roles, you'll get to see again the list of all those predefined roles that you have in System Manager. What's the name of the most powerful role?
System administrator.
System administrator. It's going to be located on the second page here, system administrator. And all I need to do is select that one. You see, it's the only role right now that I have selected. And that's it. If this is a pure just administrator, I'm going to be able to commit, and then I would be able to log in with that name. However, the user ID, remember, is nestor@avaya.com. Again, that domain is not the zip domain. It's just a domain. It could be anything. If you have a present server, you do need to have this domain as the domain used in the present server. Otherwise, you need to create a conversion rule, converting from whatever domain you have here to the domain used in present server for that user. If you don't have present server, that domain doesn't even matter. Password, I said, was Avaya123, and I should get again this message that tells me to change the password. So I'm nestor@avaya.com, Avaya123, and I'm going to change this to C1COE123 bank, C1COE123 bank, save it, and log in with that user. So notice that I right now created two administrators, right, in different ways. And what I want to point out is that if I go to administrators, I'll see the administrator created here, the very first one that I created, and also the one that I created from user management, right? You see it here. However, if I go to user management, I only get to see the ones created in user management, not the ones created in administrators. Now, people usually ask me at this point, on sancocho.com, yeah, the domain could be anything. At this point, they ask me, what's the best way of doing it? And it all depends on preferences, I think that the one that you used before is cleaner, because all you need to do is give it a login name that doesn't have to have an structure of an email address, right? Yeah. Any login name, and a password and a role. That's it. Things a little bit cleaner than the Avaya way of doing things, because the Avaya way allows you to right away assign a device to the user, so it could be, it could have more information that could be at some point a little bit confusing. So it all depends. If you want to have only administrators with no devices, like administrator accounts with no devices, go and do it. I'm going to call that the Nortel way. If you want to assign an administrator with right away a communication device, maybe do it the Avaya way. I didn't assign a communication device because I don't have yet in the picture session manager or CM, so I don't have a way to specify a communication profile yet. Okay? Now, stay here with me. You actually don't have to create administrators the way I just did it. I just wanted to show you why that they're walking you through these places. And they kind of talk about the communication profile. I'll talk about the communication profile later. Notice that they're talking about communication profile and session manager profile, but I'll talk about that with some other slides that I think do a better job. Here's where you assign a role to the user. I'm in page 112, and potentially assign a group, or actually assign a user to a group. We haven't talked about groups yet, So it doesn't make any sense right now, but you could assign a user to a group there. Now, the next exercise that you're going to be doing is towards creating your own role, in case you're not happy with the predefined roles in System Manager. For that to happen, you need to understand first this thing known as a resource. So they say here, what's a resource? And they say anything administered with System Manager. Anything administered with System Manager. I actually prefer to see it as anything that you can click on System Manager. If you're able to click on something in System Manager, you're clicking on a resource. Anything you can click on System Manager is a resource. Now, there's so many things you can click on System Manager. So Avaya divided those resources in different types. So if you're clicking, let's say, on a Session Manager, you're clicking on a Session Manager resource. If you click on a CM, you're clicking on a CM resource. I mean, those are easy. If you click on a user, you're clicking on a user resource. That one is easy as well. If you click on a menu, one of these main menus in System Manager, if you click on one of these menus here, any of these menus, you're clicking on an operation resource. Okay, so that one is a little bit different, no? You know the name, operation resource. Why is that this matters? Well, you're gonna see when you create the role that the very first question that System is gonna ask you is, okay, what type of resources you wanna open up access to in this role? And that's gonna be probably the most complicated question for you, because you're gonna see a big list of resources, a big list of type of resources that at the very beginning could be overwhelming, and you're like, okay, I don't know what to select here. It's probably going to be the hardest question. So again, as we can see here in page 114, an operation is anything on a System Manager menu. So if you're clicking on a menu in System Manager, you're clicking on an operation resource. As I said, all the resources are locked by default. So when you create a role, that role is going to be empty with no access to any resource, and you start opening access to different types of resources. How you do it? You need to go to roles and add a new role. I'm already in page 117, and this is the lab, but I'm actually, stay here with me before you do the lab. I want to show you some stuff. I'm going to create a role, so I'm going to go to groups and roles. I'll give you time to do it. I'm going to go to roles, if it ever goes there. Okay, and you only see right now the System Administrator role, but if you expand that one out, you're going to see all of the other roles. So the other roles are kind of like children of the System Administrator role. The System Administrator role is the parent right now. This is going to get you one time. You're going to come here and you're going to click on new to create a new role, and it's going to tell you that a new role cannot be added to the top level. Please select a role first. So this is telling you that you need to select first a parent for that role that you're trying to create. So right now I could say, hey, the parent of my role is going to be System Administrator. It's like the starting point, you know. If I do it here, all of the stuff that is associated to System Administrator, I'm going to be able to decide if I want it as part of my role or not. Okay, so that's the parent role right now. And now if I click on new, I'm going to be able to create my new role. So, and notice now that the parent role name is System Administrator. Okay, so role name. The exercise is going to be about creating a role that allows a user in System Manager to administer CM and only CM. So all of the other menus rather than CM should be grayed out. That's going to be the exercise. So role name, I'm gonna call this here CM. I think the name they want to give it CM Helpdesk. I'm going to call this Nestor since I'm using your lab. I don't want you to get confused. I want you to know that this is the role that I'm creating for demonstration. Notice that there is a role description field that is mandatory. I'm going to go with maybe a role to administer CM. Something like that. And there is not much I can do here other than click on commit and continue. So when I click on commit and continue, now the role is created, but it's empty. This role has no access to resources at all. If I were to assign this role to a user right now, that user will see nothing in System Manager. Everything would be grayed out. So that's when I have to click on add mapping, because that's how you add resources. You see there, add mapping. So if I click in add mapping, which I would prefer if they were to say add resources, you know, but they go with add mapping. Click on add mapping, and first question you're gonna be asked is group name. Groups are these mysterious things that I haven't talked about, and it's empty. Right now you have no groups, so just skip it. I'll talk about groups later. And this is the question that I was saying is sometimes the most complicated question. Resource type. And I say it's the most complicated question to answer at the beginning, especially if you're new to this, because take a look at this. It's a large, a lot of options that you have for resource types. So you need to figure out what's the resource type where you're gonna find the resources that you're trying to open access to the user. Remember, a resource is something a user can click on, right? So right now, in this example, in this exercise, what I'm saying is that I want this role to be able to click on this menu, right? Communication Manager. I want that user with that role to be able to click on that menu and administer CM. I also said before that menus are associated to operation resources. Remember? So the first thing that I'm gonna do, since I'm familiar with System Manager in a lot of versions, and Avaya changes this with every single release, I'm gonna try to give you a rule of thumb so you're able to configure this in any release. So what I would do is, okay, I'm gonna go to operations. I'm gonna look for operations because I know that that menu, you know, could be there. So operation, all, I can't specify anything here, but all.